April 10th is an important day for all of us in Guilford. As Americans, we're taxed in any number of ways, but we don't have a right to express ourselves in approving or rejecting that tax. Today, we are, as members of the Board of Finance, submitting the 2018-2019 budget for your approval. We hope, first of all, that you will come out to vote on April 10th. And if you are watching this in advance of the public hearing, that you come out on April 3rd to Town Hall for that. I am a member of the Board of Finance for a number of years, and I'm proud to introduce our chairman, Mike Ailes, and one of our ranking members, Jeff Beatty. Together, we're going to try to provide an informational program for you on the nature of the budget, how we structured it, and where we are now and what the major issues are for your considerations. To start out, we'd like to present some background to you on how these budgets were formulated and how we got to the point of a 2.39 increase, which is what my colleagues and I will describe to you. This has been a complicated year because it involves the mill rate, it involves a change in the grand list, and it involves paying for our debt service. It's a complicated year, and I can tell you that we have been meeting with the Board of Selectmen and the Board of Education since late fall. All of us on the board, not just our 3 members, but all 7 members, have attended workshop meetings with the Board of Education in December and January, and a series of workshops with the various departments in the town government from, I guess from December on, with some important meetings in January, where, believe it or not, we had the experience of watching every department in the town make its presentation. These budgets were paired by the board as submitted by their staffs. They were paired a lot by the Board of Education and by the Board of Selectmen. When they came to us, the budgets had a 2.91% tax increase built in. We felt that was too much. We felt that the burden would have been excessive on the taxpayer, and we made a strong effort. Indeed, our effort was almost near unanimous to cut that budget as it was presented to us from a 2.91 stage to a 2.38 stage. And that involved the cutting of about $500,000 in expenditures, equally from the Board of Education and the Board of Selectmen. Not that these were frivolous areas that we cut. They were all important, all essential. We always would ask them, if you had to lose something, what would it be? And they would come back at us and say, well, we could possibly live without A or B. But we believe that the cuts are such that we have not, they've been painful, but they have not cut into the bone and sinew of our operation. To start us off, I'd like to turn to my friend Jeff and ask him how the final budget was shaped, what parts of it, what is the level, the percentage level of increase for the Board of Education, for the Board of Selectmen, and what was the process involved in bringing this to where we are submitting it now.
Sure, thank you, Ken. As Ken touched on, the process is quite long. It culminates in the vote on April 10th, but the department heads on the town side and the principals on the Board of Education side put together their budgets, and then they present them to the superintendent, who then presents his budget to the Board of Education. And on the town side, the department heads put together their budgets, who present it to the Board of Selectmen, who then adopt a budget that they present to us. The workshops are an opportunity to discuss various programs, changes, needs, and wants of the departments, but ultimately the Board of Education takes the superintendent's budget, makes adjustments to it and reduces it, and presents a budget to the Board of Finance. And similarly, the Board of Selectmen receives the department heads' budgets and then makes reductions in those numbers to come up with a budget that they feel confident in presenting to the Board of Finance as well. Once we receive it, then we can ask questions through public hearings and workshops to try and find, as Ken mentioned, areas where there may be room for additional cuts. Having gone through that this year, the combined town and school operating budgets, those are the expenses associated with the services provided to the town by the fire department, the police department, public works on the town side, and by the teachers, custodians, and administrators on the Board of Education side. The combined increase in operating costs is 1.74%, which is slightly less than the average annual rate of inflation. So why is the budget going up, as Ken mentioned, by just under 3%? Well, we don't just have operating expenses in the town, we have debt service that we have to account for as well. And when the debt service, when we say debt service, we're including things as like bond projects for capital improvements throughout the town, the biggest one being, of course, the new high school. And so we're at a level in the debt service right now where the payments due from the town on our bond for principal and interest are quite just about at the peak.
At the peak.
Of those.
It will drop off in 2020.
Right. And so we're paying the debt that we've incurred to build the school and to make other capital improvements throughout town. And so that is a component that increases the total increase, the total size of the tax increase. And so that's how we get to that point. And then as Ken noted, we wanted to, as a board, wanted to make additional adjustments, and so we reduced that by another additional $500,000, allocated $250 to the Board of Education, $250 to the Board of Selectmen. So that's kind of how we arrived at the point where we are. Yeah.
Mike, you have challenged us this year with charts. We never had charts before, and these are beautiful. It looks professional. It's like the 6 o'clock news.
I've got an office that actually can produce these, so I'm a little bit fortunate on that. Well, this time I think more than any other time, it's good to do a little bit of an educational component to what goes into really what is the mill rate. And we all received revaluations from the fall and how that affects taxes. And there is a number that is out there that I've heard many, many times. The board has heard it, and that's about the mill rate and the 6.6% increase in the mill rate. And that would be true regarding the budget referendum should it pass on April 10th. The educational component of this, though, really comes down to what happens when, or why that mill rate is what it is, as Jeff alluded to. It's not just a matter of a 2.39% budget increase. There's also some state revenue that's not going to be coming in, and most importantly, there's a grand list drop, and that grand list drop was about 3.72, so up towards 4%.
And we have lost about $225,000 in state aid.
$225 in state aid. So you put that all together, that is where the mill rate impact is more than what we have typically seen in the past. If the grand list had stayed flat, and I will discuss that in a second, then it would be a much different story, and we'd be just really looking at the budget increase as what would be the tax increase. So yes, these boards, I want to spend a little bit of time on the boards because it took so long to print them. But basically on how mill rate is it calculated, this is probably one question that we get asked numerous times. And of course, all this information is on the town website. But the mill rate is basically calculated assuming, and this is of course all assuming the current proposed budget referendum passes. And there's numbers on the right-hand side, and I'm just going to briefly go through those. So the fiscal year 18-19 budget that we're talking about, which is the total cost to provide all the town and school services and the debt service, is $97,460,807. And when you take that and you subtract out the state aid, grants, the town fees, which would be building permits, ambulance charges, other fees that the town actually can collect that are not taxes, that would be $5,820,174. The grand levy is really the number that is needed to raise taxes. And that's the number that we need to raise that is not coming from the other items that are non-taxable. And that's $91,640,633. That's the number we've been focusing on. This is after we've made the $500,000 worth of cuts. So this number is the number going to referendum. When you look at the 2017 grand list, and that amount, as you see, is about just over $2.9 billion. The grand list from last year, it dropped 3.72, as I mentioned. And what that means is that the mill rate is really the grand levy, which we need to raise from taxes, divided by the grand list. And so you see it as a decimal, but it turns into 31.30 mils. That's the number that we all talk about when it comes to what do you apply to your assessment. Guilford's current mill rate is 29.36, and that's the 6.6% increase when you look at the difference between the two. If the grand list had stayed completely equal, with no change at all, didn't drop and didn't go up, the mill rate would be 30.15. And I think it's important to note that would be a 2.68% increase, which basically is the number, it's close to or around the number that we would be looking at in terms of the budget increase when you talk about the debt service and the revenue shortfall. So that's how mill rate is calculated. So that's the first part of our little educational series here that we're trying to do.
So that represents a 2.68% increase
That is right.
over the current mill rate,
That is right.
Using the current grand list.
using the current grand list.
Right.
Using the current, yes, current grand list. So the proposed grand list has gone down
Right.
by that 372, and it all compounds. Revenue, less grand list to be able to, so you have to change the mill rate to make up that allocation, and then you have of course, the budget increase, or decrease for that matter. So this is where we get into the discussion that's been happening throughout the community, whether it's social media, Big Y, gas station, wherever you want to talk about it.
Soccer fields.
Soccer fields.
Right.
My days have passed on the soccer fields and lacrosse fields. But so what we're looking at is the mill rate versus the reval that everyone received and the property tax. So just a quick lesson for all those who either do or don't know, a reminder. The property value, so you take the property value, your market value, it's also known property market value of your home, you multiply it times 70%, you multiply it times the mill rate, and you divide it by 1,000, and that's your yearly tax. So there's two scenarios here that I think are very important to show. The first scenario is simply that there's no change at all in your assessment. Your assessment was the same as last year, and we're going to base this on a market value home of $465,000. Why? Because that is the average cost of a home or property in the town of Guilford. And that's, by the way, Realtor.com, if you want to know where my facts are. So the scenario looks at 465, and you multiply it times the assessed value of 70%, and you get 325,500. You multiply that times the mill rate, which we've already talked about, is 29.36, and then you divide it by 1,000. So your yearly tax is $9,556.68. So the assessed value for 2017, we received November, December, some of us November, some December of 2017. The new assessed value, let's say it didn't change at all. You stayed completely flat, which can happen. And and assessed values went up. I know for a fact, and I will say it on camera, that my assessed value went up. So I didn't see that 4%.
Right.
But I know a lot of other people that did see a 4% average decrease, just like the grand list. If you just take the equal amount, 325, and you multiply it times the mill rate, you get see the numbers, you do the calculations, it's $10,188.15. The tax increase is $631.47 a year. I did, divide by 12 for the month. That is a 6.6% increase. But anybody will tell you that, or especially in this board, that mill rate increases and fluctuations are not representative of tax increases, because it's based on your valuation and it's based on your assessment. So this year, we all get a revaluation. Scenario 2 is assuming simply a 4% drop in the assessment, which is the average amount that all property in the town of Guilford has dropped with this revaluation. That being the case, you take the 325 and you multiply, or drop it 4%. And when you do that, and you have the same numbers from last year, but then you look at the drop number, 312,480 is now your new assessed value. You multiply that times the mill rate of 31.3. And when you do the math, it comes out to a tax increase of basically a little more than a third of what it would have been if your assessment stayed exactly the same. When I did the numbers, I think when you get to 5%, you're really going into more of you're equaling out. So the more that your assessment dropped in the reval, the more you're not going to see a budget increase. Your budget increase is basically a
Mean a
2
tax
point
increase.
tax increase. Thank you, budget tax rate. So your tax increase is really going to be equal to the budget increase should your assessment have dropped the 4% like the rest of the community. I know of some that have dropped 8 to 10%. I do know of one that's gone up 10%. They fluctuate. So to make this statement or to put out any information that says this is what the mill rate increase is and this is what your tax increase is not
Accurate.
Not accurate.
And it would be a misrepresentation. And simply just looking at this, these numbers will show that. And the last board is going to take me all of about 30 seconds to go over. And that last board is basically the same information, but how do you find this out yourself? I know it's going to be hard to read. I don't expect Shannon to actually zoom in on this because you could actually figure this out yourself by going to the town website. The link is, and very simply, the link is on the board. But if you go to the town and you go at the bottom, there is a section that's called, I believe it's resources and forms, or actually, no, I'm sorry, it's fiscal year 18-19 budget information. When you click the link at the bottom of the homepage of the town website, you actually get a calculator that you can bring up. And these are actually snapshots of putting in those same exact numbers that I just did, the no change in assessment and the 4%. And guess what? The calculator works. It comes out with the same exact numbers, go figure. So if you wanted to find out what your reval impact on
Go
the mill
online.
rate and on ultimately your property taxes, then this is how, a really easy tool to do it. So
If I could just add to that.
Jeff, please do.
The two things to keep in mind with regard to the data that you need to plug into that calculator, you can also find online. Your current assessment will show up on your tax bill, which you can click on a link to at the Guilford Tax Collector's website, and you can actually see what your tax bill is, and on your tax bill, or if you have a copy of it at home, since you may be preparing for your income taxes, the tax bill will state what your assessment is. Then if you don't have your revaluation notice, you can go to the assessor's website, type in your property address or your name, and call up your field card, and that will show you both the fair market value, the 100% value of your property, and the 70% value, or the assessed value of your property for the 2017 grand list, which is the value that we use when calculating this budget and the budgets for the years to come until the next revaluation. So if you don't have the information with regard to what your current property value is or what last year's property value is, you can get that information easily through the town's website, on the tax collector's website, and on the assessor's website. So if you're worried that you don't have that information, you can get it very, very easily by following those links on the town website. So I just wanted people to know that the resources or the information that they may need to complete that calculator is readily available if you don't have those notices that you received from the assessor following the reval at the end of last year.
And it's only those two numbers that you need.
Right.
You just need the 2013 and the 2017. You plug the numbers in and it does the math.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly.
So why do we find these to be responsible budgets, gentlemen?
Well, I think they're responsible budgets because the Board of Education has done a great job in keeping the increase below 2%, and the town is also on an operation side kept it, when you combine them, below 2%. When you add in the debt service, which are obligations that we as a town agreed to incur a number of years ago, we're paying for capital improvements that the town determined was necessary, and we're now operating as a town in about as efficient a way as we can. So I think that the increases that are being requested, given the services that are being provided, are very reasonable. Also keep in mind that the increase on the town side includes the addition of additional firefighters to serve North Guilford. So the services that are being provided to the entire town, and more particularly the citizens of North Guilford, are increasing in this budget, yet the operating expenses as a whole are decreasing at a rate below the rate of inflation. So,
Great point.
yeah.
We should note that in looking at these budgets, about 80 to 85% of each budget is beyond touching.
Mhm.
It is salaries and benefits for both our town employees, negotiated, I might add, and our teachers and non-professional and professional administrative staffs. And we're assured that we have kept our employment of people to the minimum, to the area where it's absolutely needed. And we have not gone wild with any increases in any department. I don't think there's been any employee changes. There may be one teacher added for the music and art program and nothing beyond that, right, Mike?
The Board of Ed will tell you that they've reallocated resources. The enrollment has not dropped nearly what they thought it would have 5-6 years ago. So, when you don't have an enrollment drop, there's really no staff or teachers you can take out. But there are opportunities where there have been reallocation of some of those teachers because of certain aspects of their budget that needed to, because that enrollment didn't drop, and we've taken on other things in-house, such as tuition and some other things. So, and on the town side, the past administration did a great job in looking at attrition and not filling those positions. So there are less positions on the staff side too, and no replacements. So if someone leaves, the workload has gotten a little bit more for those current staff. But there's been very little
We've had,
replacement or no added staff, but also the replacement has been, there's been no replacement.
We've had people asking us about the rainy day fund.
Mhm.
And it's a fund that we have proudly built up over the years to
Mhm.
now it's at about a $4 million level.
It's coming close to 10, but the point is it's a between I think it's a 9.2 and 9.5% of our budget, which is about where we want to be. And I would just note that this is the first year. Last year we started going into this, but this is the first year that we can actually start talking about, now that we've built the undesignated fund balance to where it needs to be for a lot of different
Which is
reasons
that
that we don't have time to
percentage.
go over here.
Which is that
Which is that percentage, we can start looking at where that money, if we get excess money and we have savings and expenditures, or we get more revenue, for that matter, where that money can be reallocated to in one-time areas. Because otherwise, if we're balancing the budget by that, it's not a good idea,
Right.
because you're looking for the money next year and then it's going to pop the increase there.
We should add, by the way, that there will be one question on the ballot, and that's a question of bonding for the education department. And what they are requesting, and it's an absolute need, is HVAC, which is heating, ventilation, and air conditioning, upgrades and repairs and upgrades to the Baldwin Middle School and the Jones Elementary School. These are both in terrible needs. We've had breakdowns over the last few years, and this will be a bonding question, well within our bounding range, so we're not going crazy on bonding, of $3,650,000, and that will be the only question in addition to your saying yes or no to the budget. We hope it'll be yes.
If I could just add something to the bonding question, I think it's also important to note that the HVAC systems at both Baldwin and Jones are the original systems. And both schools are, I'm sad to say, in excess of 40 years old. I'm sad to say that they're in excess of 40 years old, because I'm dating myself. But on the other hand, it's good that we're maintaining and keeping those schools in a condition where they can continue to be used for current and future generations. Having said that, there have been occasions where the parts have broken down, and the systems are so old that repair parts don't even exist any longer and have to be manufactured specially for those systems. So I think when it comes to voting for the bonding question, there's no doubt in my mind anyhow that the systems have outlived their useful lives. It's time to replace them, and it's for the benefit of all of the students attending Jones and Baldwin that those systems be replaced.
Mike, do you have a last word?
Well, I think when this whole process started, and I've been saying and I believe I had it read into the comments since I wasn't at the vote, as you
Right.
know, but you so eloquently read for me.
Very eloquently.
I would, add that we've been focusing on the budget, not the mill rate, not really even in the revals, even though we explained a lot here, or I explained a lot. It's largely, if you look at where the concerns are of the citizens of Guilford, is usually how are we reining in and how are we keeping expenses as mitigated and increased as possible. When you look at operating budgets on both sides, now the Board of Ed is 3 years in a row under 2. The town has a different set of circumstances when they're running 24/7, 365 days a week, and have storms and other issues that the town has to address. When they come in together and it was just over 2, and with the cuts that we had, it's 1.74. Those operating budgets are incredibly, incredibly good. So to say that they're well crafted, they are well crafted. 174 is a very good number, and I keep hearing about cost of living and inflation, and those numbers in operating, it's below or at where everyone says we shouldn't be going over.
Right.
That is a large reason why there was a $500,000 cut. I want to reiterate, it was not at all because these budgets were not well presented and well crafted. It was because of the sign of the times. It was because of the conditions of the grand list going down. We knew there were a lot of factors going into it, and this was a year that we felt we needed to be closer to a cost of living or an increase in the inflation rate that we felt was more palatable. It had nothing to do with the fact that these budgets were not already presented in a fine fashion, and that's the only thing I would focus on. The debt service, you can't cut the debt service, and it's the high school, and I would never ever trade the increase. That's the differential of the debt service to the operating. I would never trade that for what we have now in this community.
We
So-
should remember that neighboring communities are suffering losses in enrollment in their schools, and we're not.
And we are basically
We're
flat.
basically flat, which is remarkably good.
Yes.
And real estate is soft throughout the state. And this grand list experience is going to be one that will be experienced elsewhere.
Yes.
Want to thank you for your patience and attention to our presentation, and ask you to, on behalf of the Board of Finance, which nearly unanimously approved this budget, and its assignment to you for consideration,
And unanimously on the Board of Selectmen, and
and unanimously on the Board of Selectmen, and unanimously on the Board of Education. So we are of a mind that this is reasonable and doable and worth your support. So on April 10th, we urge you to come out and vote for the new budget as presented. Thank you.